The Capitalist Machine Devouring Your Dreams, a Deleuzian analysis of desire's capture. Introduction. The awakening of philosophical suspicion. What if everything you believe to be true is nothing more than a meticulously designed construction meant to control every aspect of your existence? This is not a rhetorical question designed to provoke paranoia, but rather an invitation to a radical philosophical investigation into the conditions of possibility for contemporary thought. Gilles Deleuze dedicated his intellectual life to unveiling the subtle mechanisms by which power systems organize not only your visible actions, but also your most intimate thoughts, your seemingly spontaneous desires, and even the experience you have of your own body. These systems do not operate through brutal repression, but through a productive organization that transforms you into a useful agent for power structures without you even perceiving this transformation. Tonight, or rather, in this text, we undertake the task of systematically dismantling these invisible structures that shape our subjectivity. Historical context. Philosophy born from horror. Deleuze was born in 1925 in Paris, immersed in a world tearing itself apart before his eyes. His youth was marked by the rise of fascism in Europe, World War II, and the traumatic experience of watching sophisticated intellectuals justify unimaginable atrocities through elaborate systems of thought. His older brother, Georges, was deported and died in a Nazi concentration camp after participating in the French resistance. This experience was not merely a personal tragedy, but became the existential foundation of his entire philosophical project. For Deleuze, fascism was not an isolated historical aberration, but an ever-present possibility in any system that demands unity, fixed identity, and hierarchical organization. He witnessed how fascism not only dominated bodies through violence, but also captured desires, making people desire their own oppression. This crucial observation would shape all his subsequent philosophy. How is it possible that people desire what dominates them? How does voluntary servitude become not only accepted, but desired? Unlike many intellectuals of his generation, who surrendered to academic games of prestige and sterile debates over textual interpretations, Deleuze refused this path. He understood that philosophy could not be merely a contemplative exercise, but should function as a toolbox of concepts for concrete liberation. Each concept he created, multiplicity, rhizome, body without organs, desiring machines, lines of flight, was forged not as theoretical ornament, but as a conceptual weapon designed to help concrete individuals escape capture by power systems. The war years taught Deleuze something fundamental. Thought itself can be weaponized. The Nazis had demonstrated how rational systems, bureaucratic efficiency, and organized thinking could produce genocide. The question became, how do we think differently? How do we create concepts that resist totalization, that refuse the logic of domination embedded in Western metaphysics? This was not an academic question, but a matter of survival, both individual and collective. Evidence. 1. The fiction of the unified self-conduct, now a simple but profoundly disturbing phenomenological experiment. Observe yourself carefully for 1 complete hour. Do not judge, do not analyze, simply observe. Notice the bodily sensations that arise and disappear, an itch on your arm, tension in your neck, the pulse of your heart. Observe the thoughts crossing your consciousness, a childhood memory, a worry about the future, a fragment of music, a sexual fantasy, a to-do list. Register the emotions that emerge without warning: sudden irritation, inexplicable nostalgia, diffuse anxiety, momentary joy. Now the fundamental question: where is the unified I that supposedly is having all these experiences? Where is the organizing center, the stable subject that is the source and receiver of all these phenomena? When you search for this I with radical honesty, what do you find? The Deleuzian answer is disturbing. You find nothing. There is no substantial core, no permanent essence, no fixed identity. What exists is only a continuous flow of intensities, affects, perceptions, and thoughts that belong to no pre-existing subject. The unity of the self is not discovered through honest introspection, but imposed through social, linguistic, and institutional mechanisms. From childhood, you are taught to answer the question, Who are you? With a proper name, a stable identity, a coherent narrative. But this coherence is a useful fiction, not an ontological truth. Deleuze argues that we are multiplicities, heterogeneous assemblages of processes without an organizing center. There is no you that has experiences. There are only experiences happening, flows of intensity temporarily organizing themselves into patterns we call I. This is not abstract metaphysical speculation. It is an empirical observation that anyone can verify through careful attention. The problem is that we have been trained not to see our own multiplicity, to impose unity where there is only difference, to construct identity where there is only becoming. Think about it. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago, not even the same person you were this morning. Your cells regenerate, your memories reconstruct themselves, your desires shift. The continuity you experience is a narrative construction, a story you tell yourself to maintain the illusion of coherence. This illusion is not accidental. It serves crucial functions for power. A unified subject can be counted, controlled, made responsible, and productive. A multiplicity cannot be so easily managed. When you recognize yourself as multiplicity, you become ungovernable in a fundamental sense. You cannot be reduced to a profile, a category, a target demographic. You overflow every attempt at classification. Evidence 2. Institutions that demand unity. Examine now how all social institutions not only presuppose but actively produce this fictitious unity. Consider the bureaucratic forms you constantly fill out. Each demands one name, one identity, one address, one nationality. Administrative language does not recognize multiplicity. You must be singular, countable, identifiable. The legal system operates on the same principle. The law cannot prosecute multiplicities. It needs a unified subject that can be held responsible. When you sign a contract, when you are charged with a crime, when you sue or are sued, the entire apparatus of justice depends on the fiction that you, as a continuous, identical subject, are the same person who committed the act, made the promise, or suffered the injury. The law cannot function without this foundational lie. Medicine similarly organizes your body as a unified organism belonging to a singular patient. Your medical records track your body, your symptoms, your treatment history. The medical gaze constructs you as an integrated biological system with clear boundaries. When doctors speak of your health, they are producing the very unity they claim to observe. The body is treated as a machine with proper functions, and any deviation is pathologized. But what if your body is not one body, but many? What if different organs, different systems, different cellular processes have their own trajectories that cannot be reduced to a single health or illness? Psychology and psychiatry are perhaps the most insidious in their production of unity. The entire edifice of psychoanalysis, which Deleuze spent much of his career combating, is built on the premise of a unified psyche with a discoverable structure. Freud's trinity of id, ego, and superego, his Oedipal complex, his notion of the unconscious as a theater of representation, all of these impose organizational schemas on the chaotic multiplicities of desire and thought. When a psychiatrist diagnoses you with a disorder, they are not discovering a pre-existing condition, but producing you as a particular kind of unified subject. The depressed subject, the anxious subject, the schizophrenic subject. Education systems require the most sustained production of unified subjectivity. From the moment you enter school, you are taught to sit still, to focus attention, to develop a consistent personality that teachers can evaluate. Your scattered interests must be organized into a coherent career path. Your various talents and incapacities must be reduced to a grade point average. The entire educational apparatus is designed to transform the wild multiplicities of childhood into the docile, predictable unities required by capitalism. Even language itself enforces unity. The pronoun I grammatically demands singularity. When you say, I think, you are performing the very unity you claim to describe. The structure of language makes it nearly impossible to speak from multiplicity. We lack the grammatical forms, the syntactic structures, the vocabulary to articulate our actual experience of being many. This is not an accident, but the result of millennia of linguistic development within power structures that require singular subjects. Evidence 3. The productive nature of desire. Now let us turn to perhaps Deleuze's most revolutionary insight, the nature of desire itself. Psychoanalysis, particularly in its Freudian and Lacanian forms, claims that desire is fundamentally lack. According to this view, you desire because something is missing. The infant desires the mother's breast because it lacks nourishment. The adult desires a romantic partner because they lack completion. All desire in this framework is structured by absence, by a hole in being that can never be truly filled. But watch desire in action with fresh eyes, unburdened by psychoanalytic dogma. When you eat, are you merely filling a void, or are you producing a new state of being? The act of eating creates pleasure, generates energy, transforms your body's chemistry, produces new capacities. It is not a negative operation, filling lack, but a positive one, producing intensity. When you desire someone sexually, is it because you lack them, or because the encounter would produce new affects, new sensations, new becomings? Desire does not seek to possess what it lacks. Desire produces realities. This insight fundamentally transforms our understanding of human motivation and, crucially, of how power operates through desire. If desire were truly lack, then the capitalist promise to fill that lack through consumption might make sense. But if desire is production, then capitalism's relationship to desire is far more sinister. Capitalism does not repress desire or exploit lack. Instead, it captures desire's productive force and channels it into circuits of production and consumption that serve capital accumulation. Think about how advertising works. It does not create desire ex nihilo by making you aware of what you lack. Rather, it plugs into your already existing desiring production and redirects it. You already desire connection, intensity, novelty, pleasure. Advertising says, direct that desire toward this product. Buy this car and your desire for freedom will flow through it. Purchase this phone and your desire for connection will be channeled through its circuits. Wear these clothes and your desire for self-expression will be organized by fashion trends. Capitalism is brilliant because it does not fight desire. It harnesses it. Every desire you have becomes a potential site of profit. Your desire to be healthy generates the wellness industry. Your desire for knowledge generates the education market. Your desire for meaning generates the self-help industrial complex. Even your desire to resist capitalism generates markets for conscious consumption and ethical products. There is no outside to capital's capture because capital has learned to feed on desire itself. Deleuze and Guattari, in their masterwork Anti-Oedipus, introduced the concept of desiring machines to describe this process. We are not subjects who have desires. We are assemblages of desires that produce reality. A desiring machine is any connection that produces a flow, mouth-breast, hand tool, eye landscape, worker factory. These machines do not lack anything, they produce continuously, but capitalism organizes these machines into larger assemblages that serve accumulation. Your desiring production is not yours. It has been captured, coded, and made profitable. Evidence 4. The microphysics of power trace now how power actually operates in contemporary society. The traditional model of power, inherited from political philosophy, imagines domination. A sovereign who commands, subjects who obey, violence that enforces compliance. But this model fails to explain how power functions in democratic, ostensibly free societies. You are not forced at gunpoint to go to work, to consume, to compete, to optimize yourself. Yet you do these things. How? Deleuze, building on Foucault's insights, reveals that power operates primarily through organization rather than domination. Schools organize thought according to disciplinary divisions and hierarchical levels. They do not merely repress ignorance, they produce knowledge in particular forms. They create the good student, the average student, the failing student, categories that seem descriptive but are actually productive. Jobs organize time into measurable, exchangeable units. The 8-hour workday, the hourly wage, the deadline, these are not natural facts, but organizational impositions that reshape your experience of temporality itself. You begin to think of your time as something that can be spent, saved, wasted, invested. Your life becomes dividable into productive and unproductive moments. The weekend exists to reproduce your capacity to work, not as genuine freedom. Medicine organizes the body according to norms of health and pathology. It measures, tests, diagnoses, and treats according to statistical averages and functional ideals. Your body is constantly compared to standards, and any deviation generates intervention. You internalize these norms, monitoring yourself for symptoms, optimizing your diet and exercise, taking preventive measures. You become your own doctor, your own disciplinarian. Social media provides perhaps the clearest contemporary example of power through organization. Platforms do not force you to post, to like, to comment. Instead, they organize your social relations into quantifiable metrics. Your friendships become measured in likes and comments. Your experiences become evaluated by their shareability. Your identity becomes constructed through curated posts and carefully managed images. The platform provides the structure. You do the work of self-production within that structure. This is the genius and horror of contemporary power. You internalize the organization until you police yourself. You do not need external surveillance because you have become your own surveiller. You do not need explicit commands because you have internalized the imperative to optimize, to perform, to produce. The most effective control is the control that appears as freedom, as your own choice, as the expression of your authentic self. Deleuze calls this process modulation. Unlike the old disciplinary societies that molded individuals into fixed forms, the soldier, the worker, the citizen, contemporary control societies continuously modulate individuals according to changing demands. You are not formed once, but constantly reformed. Your skills must be updated. Your knowledge must be current. Your identity must be flexible. You are never finished, never complete, always in process. This creates a permanent state of anxiety and inadequacy that drives you to continuous self-improvement, which is really continuous self-production according to market demands. The rhizome, a model for resistance against these arborescent, hierarchical structures of power, Deleuze offers the rhizome as both a model for understanding reality and a strategy for resistance. The rhizome, borrowed from botany, think of ginger root or grass, is a non-hierarchical, decentralized network where any point can connect to any other point. There is no top or bottom, no center or periphery, no main root with subordinate branches. Instead, there are only connections, multiplicities, lines of flight. The rhizome has several principles that make it revolutionary. First, connection. Anything can be connected to anything else. Your memories can connect to your current sensations, which connect to political events, which connect to geological processes. There is no proper order, no necessary sequence. Second, heterogeneity. The rhizome includes radically different elements without reducing them to a common essence. Bodies, languages, technologies, institutions, affects, all can connect without being made the same. Third, multiplicity. The rhizome is not one thing with many parts, but many things with no unifying whole. It has no subject or object, only flows and intensities. Fourth, a signifying rupture. The rhizome can be broken at any point and will regenerate from the break. Cut a rhizome anywhere, and both pieces continue to grow. This makes it incredibly resilient. You cannot destroy a rhizome by attacking its center because it has no center. Finally, cartography and decalcomania. The rhizome is not a traced copy of some pre-existing structure, but an open map that can always be modified. Connected to other maps entered at multiple points, it is oriented toward experimentation with the real, not interpretation or representation of an ideal. Why does the rhizome terrify institutions built on hierarchical control? Because it cannot be governed using traditional methods. You cannot decapitate a rhizome, it has no head. You cannot root it out, it spreads horizontally. You cannot map it definitively. It is always changing, always connecting in new ways. Every attempt to contain it produces new lines of flight, new escape routes, new possibilities for connection. Think about how resistant movements actually work, not in their idealized representations, but in their material reality. They do not have clear leaders, fixed programs, or unified ideologies. Instead, they form temporary assemblages. This group connects with that group. This tactic connects with that strategy. This local struggle connects with that global issue. When the state arrests leaders, new ones emerge. When one tactic is suppressed, others develop. The movement flows around obstacles like water, finding new paths, new connections, new modes of resistance. The Internet, before its capture by platform capitalism, demonstrated rhizomatic potential. Information could spread without central control. Connections formed spontaneously across vast distances. Communities organized around shared interests rather than geographical proximity or institutional affiliation. Anyone could create content, and any content could connect to any other. This terrified traditional media and government institutions because it escaped their organizational logic. But here is the crucial insight. Capitalism has proven remarkably adept at colonizing even rhizomatic structures. The Internet has been largely captured through platform monopolies that impose organizational structures on seemingly free networks. Social media appears rhizomatic. You can follow anyone, connect with anyone, share anything. But the algorithms that determine what you see, the data extraction that monetizes your activity, and the terms of service that constrain your behavior all reimpose hierarchical control at a deeper level. This means the rhizome is not a solution, but a strategy, not a destination, but a movement. The question is always, how do we create rhizomatic connections faster than they can be captured? How do we maintain lines of flight that remain genuinely unorganized? Practical applications, becoming imperceptible. So what does all this mean for you, concretely in your actual life? Deleuze's philosophy is not meant to be admired from a distance, but used, modified, experimented with. Here are practical applications of these concepts. Start by noticing the contradictions within yourself that you have been taught to resolve. The part of you that craves solitude and the part that desperately needs connection. The desire for security and the desire for adventure. The impulse toward discipline and the impulse toward chaos. You have been trained to see these as conflicts that must be resolved, to choose one side or find a stable balance. Stop. These are your multiplicities. Let them coexist. Let them produce different realities at different times. You do not need to be consistent. Consistency is a demand made by institutions that need to predict and control you. Experiment with your body in ways that have no approved purpose. Not exercise for health, not dance for performance, not movement for any goal at all. Simply explore. What else can this body do? What movements feel interesting without being useful? What sensations arise when you attend to them without judgment? Your body is not a machine with fixed purposes determined by anatomy and physiology. It is a field of infinite potential, capable of effects and becomings that no medical textbook predicts. Try spending an entire day without any identity. Do not tell anyone your name, your profession, your story. When someone asks, "What do you do?" respond with what you are doing right now, not with your career. When they ask, "Where are you from?" describe the journey that brought you to this moment, not your hometown or nationality. Notice how disorienting this is, how much of your selfhood depends on these fixed markers. Notice also how liberating it can be to exist, even temporarily, without identity. Follow desires that serve no approved purpose. Not destructive desires. Deleuze is not advocating for reckless abandon, but productive desires that generate no profit, no status, no self-improvement. Learn something useless. Create something ugly. Connect with people who offer no networking benefit. The point is not that all desires are good, but that desires allowed to flow freely produce possibilities that no system could predict. Every desire that escapes capitalist coding is a line of flight. Stop asking yourself, "What do I lack?" Stop consuming based on the promise that this product will complete you. Instead, ask, "What am I producing? What connections am I making? What intensities am I generating? What becomings am I entering?" Think of yourself not as a subject with needs, but as a factory of desires, constantly producing new realities. Practice what Deleuze calls becoming imperceptible. This does not mean disappearing, but rather escaping the categories through which power perceives and captures you. When algorithms try to profile you, give contradictory data. When institutions try to classify you, overflow their categories. When capitalism tries to target you, desire what cannot be sold. The goal is not invisibility, but ungraspability, to be too multiple, too mobile, too changing to be fixed in place. Create connections that institutions cannot predict or authorize, friend groups that cross all demographic boundaries, collaborations that mix incompatible disciplines, desires that connect bodies, technologies, and ideas in unprecedented ways. Each of these connections is a rhizomatic growth, a line of flight from organized society. The Vincennes years and the refusal of academic capture. It is worth examining how Deleuze lived these principles, not as biography but as pedagogy. He taught at the University of Paris 8 in Vincennes, an experimental institution created after the 1968 uprisings. Vincennes was deliberately located outside Paris proper, in a working-class suburb, housed in temporary buildings. It had open enrollment, meaning anyone could attend. It explicitly rejected traditional disciplinary boundaries and encouraged collaboration between departments. At Vincennes, philosophy became something other than academic wisdom. Deleuze's classes were packed, not with career students seeking credentials, but with workers, activists, artists, and autodidacts seeking tools for thinking differently. His lectures were recorded and circulated as underground philosophy, spread through networks of desire rather than institutional authorization. He treated concepts not as truths to be memorized, but as weapons to be used, modified, or discarded based on their effectiveness. His collaboration with Felix Guattari exemplifies rhizomatic practice. Guattari was not an academic philosopher, but a psychoanalyst and political activist running an experimental psychiatric clinic. Their books together, Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus, refuse linear structure. They can be entered at any point. Chapters operate independently, but connect to other chapters in multiple ways. The writing mixes philosophy, psychology, anthropology, literature, science, and politics without privileging any discipline. The books are rhizomes in form as well as content. In 1995, suffering from severe respiratory illness that made breathing difficult and work impossible, Deleuze threw himself from the window of his Paris apartment. Some see tragedy in this act. Others see a final refusal to let institutions control even the most intimate moment, his death. He chose the time, the method, the meaning. In a society that increasingly medicalizes death, making it the domain of hospitals and protocols, Deleuze's suicide can be read as a last line of flight, a final becoming imperceptible. But to focus too much on his death is to miss the point. What matters are the concepts he created, the tools he left behind. These are not doctrines to be followed faithfully, but weapons to be seized, modified, and deployed according to your situation. Deleuze himself would insist on this. Philosophy is not about being right, but about creating concepts that help people think and live differently. The permanent revolution of becoming here is the most important point, the one that must be emphasized. The revolution is not coming. It is not a future event for which we prepare, not a dramatic overthrow that will one day arrive. The revolution is here now. In every moment that you refuse to be one, every time you follow a desire that serves no system, every line of flight you take toward becomings that no authority can predict or manage. This is not political quietism. It does not mean that collective action, organization, or resistance are unnecessary. But it does mean that revolution is not primarily about seizing state power or changing institutions from the top down. Revolution is molecular, not molar. It happens in the smallest refusals, the tiniest escapes, the most minor becomings. Every time you allow your multiplicities to coexist without forcing them into unity, you are revolutionary. Every time you create a connection that capital cannot commodify, you are insurrectionary. The beauty and terror of this perspective is that you cannot delegate revolution to a vanguard party or wait for the right historical moment. Revolution is your responsibility in every moment, and it is not a sacrifice or a duty but an experiment and a pleasure. You are not giving up something, false unity, stable identity, predictable life, for some greater good. You are discovering what you actually are beneath the fictions imposed on you. Stop trying to be who you were told to be, not because that person is bad or wrong, but because that person does not exist. You are not a unified subject with a stable identity. You are multiplicities in motion, desiring machines producing realities, assemblages of effects and percepts temporarily organized into patterns. When you recognize this, when you stop fighting against your own multiplicity and instead embrace it, everything changes. Discover what you can become when organization dissolves. This is not chaos, though it may appear chaotic to those invested in order. This is liberation. This is what you actually are beneath the fiction of unity. The self you were taught to be is a prison, and you are the only one who holds the key. The lock is opened not through dramatic gesture, but through patient experimentation, through following desires to unknown destinations, through allowing yourself to be multiple. Begin now. Not tomorrow, not after you finish reading this, not when conditions are right. Now. Notice the multiplicity within you right now. Feel the desires flowing through you right now, producing affects and connections. Follow one thread. See where it leads. Create one unauthorized connection. Take one line of flight, however small. This is not preparation for revolution, this is revolution itself. The capitalist machine feeds on your dreams by capturing your desiring production and channeling it into circuits of accumulation. But desire is always excessive, always overflowing whatever structures try to contain it. Your dreams, your multiplicities, your becomings are always more than what can be captured. The task is not to protect your dreams from capture, but to keep dreaming, keep desiring, keep producing realities faster than they can be coded, commodified, and controlled. This is what Deleuze offers, not a solution, not a program, not a final answer, but a way of thinking and living that remains perpetually open to the new, the unexpected, the unprecedented. A philosophy that is itself a line of flight from philosophy as it has been traditionally practiced. Use it. Modify it, connect it to your own situation, your own desires, your own becomings, and then, inevitably, move beyond it towards something no one, not even Deleuze himself, could have predicted. The machine will keep feeding, but you do not have to be its food. You can be its malfunction, its breakdown, its line of flight into territories it cannot colonize. Begin now.